Hey there, and thanks for tuning in to Squash Radio. My name is Connor Malley, and I'm your host. Before we get into the show, I wanted to share a little bit about me and why Squash Radio exists. So, I've been a passionate squash player for over 20 years, but what makes my path slightly different from your average squash player is I've also made squash my career. I've worn almost every hat and worked in almost every role in the industry. Some quick examples are I've gone from being a volunteer at a professional event to then becoming the CEO of the US Open. I've gone from trying to make Team USA to then becoming the director of all national team activity for US Squash. And I've certainly gone from just playing on squash courts to focusing on how the sport can grow in the United States. What has been a big part of fueling my passion all these years are the fascinating, passionate, and dedicated people involved in our sport. So, Squash Radio? Well, that's just a way to try and help share those stories. We hope you like it, and if you do, please share, comment on any of the social media platforms, or email us at squashradio@gmail.com. That's squashradio@gmail.com. Our biggest challenge is trying to get the word out, so any help is much appreciated. Without further ado, please enjoy the show. Before we get started, I have one more quick share. I started this podcast over 3 years ago, and the last time I posted an episode was in January 2018. Around that time, several factors pulled me away from continuing the podcast. In no particular order, there was burnout, increased work demands, a death in the family, as well as a loved one battling cancer. This past February and March, I finally saw a path where it might be possible to continue podcasting. Then, our world changed with the impact of the global pandemic, coupled with the aftermath of George Floyd and the reconciling the social injustice of our past and current events. It just didn't seem like it was a time I could carve out for Squash Radio. I'm still not sure if it's the right time, but I believe and hope that some of these stories might inspire one person, and that might make all the difference. So here I am trying to give it another shot. That said, please note that this interview with Renato was done in late February. Keep that in mind for our conversation.
What about this?
This call is being recorded.
For some quick background on our guests in this episode, here's a quick overview. We talk with Renato Paiva, who is the CEO or Executive Director of Access Youth Academy based in San Diego, California. Access Youth is a nonprofit after-school youth program combining squash training and academic enrichment. They are part of the network of similar programs under the SEA umbrella, or the Squash Education Alliance. Renato has been leading the charge in San Diego since 2007. On top of his role with Access Youth, he's been raising awareness for the sport on the West Coast to inspire more growth of squash. His path, he's originally from Brazil, and as a junior squash player, Renato played for the Brazilian national team. After graduating from college in Brazil, he made the move to the United States, coaching at Harvard University before making the move out west. Renato has boundless energy and channels it to drive the growth of squash on the West Coast and propel the lives of his students to a better tomorrow. Here's our conversation. Hey there, squash fans. Welcome back to another episode of Squash Radio. I'm your host, Connor O'Malley, and we're very excited to have another guest with us today, calling in from San Diego, California, and that is Renato. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Connor. Thanks for having me.
So I have to admit something. I think this is definitely the first time for Squash Radio, but I think even for myself is talking to someone that is a TV character inspired person. And I'm talking about the show that you're on, Inspired with Little America. And so, just tell us about your experience with that and how the whole project came together.
Sure. So I think the whole project came from an article on a magazine. The magazine is called Epic Magazine. And they highlighted 6 stories of amazing people, immigrants that came to this country and had an amazing life, an amazing story. And one of them is Reyna Pacheco. A lot of you know her, and a lot of people might know her as well. She was one student from Access Youth Academy, And that magazine article was all of them, all the 8 of them, were selected to become an Apple TV show.
Wow.
So they produced this amazing series called Little America that is getting a lot of good reviews. And then there was this very interesting period of producing it and who was going to be on it, and the outcome is I am very biased about it, Connor, but I think it's fantastic. I think it looks great.
Yeah, I got a chance to watch it, and it was a great episode. I think it's interesting, and I wonder what your perspective is on, think of all the movies or TV shows that you've seen inspired by real life, and now you're actually, it must have been very surreal seeing your life portrayed on screen. And so kind of give both perspectives of like, what was it like seeing someone act your part in your role, and how that maybe compares to other things you've seen?
Yeah, so that is the surreal, I think, is the right word, because for a lot of people, this is what they see on a 30-minute show, and for me, it's what I lived for many years. So it's Reyna did a fantastic job of telling the producers what has happened, because, Connor, some scenes are incredibly real and verbatim stuff that I said, and I can give you a couple of examples. So I am a huge Boston Celtics fan. So I like, instead of quoting Muhammad Ali and quoting all this, I quote basketball Celtics players.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I quote Kevin Garnett, and that is a real thing I did all the time. So why does that? And then when I'm watching the show, my character says, like the great Kevin Garnett says, and I just fell out of my chair. I just could not believe it. That's one great one. The other one that I really liked was, I often take my students into knowing the courts really well and knowing your racket really well, kind of like a more spiritual way. I do believe that the court kind of talks to you back, and maybe I'm getting a little bit too deep on those things, but the reality is, I think every court's different and every story is different. So I took Reyna on after practice, and kind of like, we no more shoes, just socks on, and I said, this is the court, and the court has history. Look at the ball marks. Look at this, and they showed that on the episode. And I thought Reyna did a great job telling them what has happened, and the episode, I think, is beautiful because of that.
Yeah, it's certainly exciting. I think anytime that, me and you and the rest of the squash community, that we see squash breaking through into mainstream, it's just so exciting. And I think this is just another, if not maybe one of the first time on the big screen seeing it totally highlighted. So it's so exciting to watch. And then, even seeing the, going through the tournament and that kind of stuff. So it was great. So were you knew this was going on, and were you, between yourself and Reyna, were you involved in sort of shaping it at all? Or was this more of coming out as a surprise of like, we've done it, and then let's just see how it turns out?
Of course, we had to sign releases and all that type of legal stuff. But Reyna was the driver, and she is the character. She's the main. I happen to be part of her story, so to be very clear that this is her. It's her story, and I happened just to coach her in the time while she was here in San Diego. So she was the one that communicated with the producers. She's the one that did the whole. There's a lot of other talks about the glass court and the casting and all the stuff that was a little bit involved. But no, when I watched it, it's funny. I was traveling and I was in New York for the Jubilee, for the SCA big weekend. And I just woke up at 4 a.m. the day they came out. I said, I gotta watch this right away. And I cried for 30 minutes. I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah. And I'm sort of realizing that for people who might not be as familiar with Reyna's story, let's just take a moment to sort of acknowledge. I mean, she really is such an inspiring person, and talk about how, because this was this early on at your journey at Access Youth?
Yeah, she was from my original group, my first group. Wow. Which is even more surreal, that a player, a human like Reyna, comes to us in our first cohort is just a gift from God. So Reyna is originally from Mexico, and she started playing late squash. She started playing at 14 and really fell in love with the game right on. She wasn't that good in the beginning, but worked extremely hard. For sure, the most hard work player I've ever coached in my life, and really pushed. She pushed me to be a better coach. She pushed everyone else around her. She made our team much better throughout the years. She was our captain for her entire time at Access, and she won 9 urban national titles between teams and individuals. Then she became a Gates Millennium Scholar, where she gets her education paid by the Gates Foundation and Bill and Melinda Gates. She ended up going to Columbia, where she played squash at the top 3 positions most of her time there. And then she became a professional squash player. So she was the first urban squash player to play pro squash. She was on the tour for about 2 years, and she played the big events in the world. I was lucky enough to see her play the TOC and play the net suites, and it was just so much fun to follow our little Reyna to play in the big matches. And then she decided to stop playing professional, and now she works for Goldman Sachs in New York City.
Yeah, I mean, what a just incredible journey, and really, I think the highlight, what I've seen of her is she was so much in the driver's seat on all of that, and I think it couldn't have been done without the support of people like yourself and the network of the squash community. But at an early age, I was like, she's switched on. She is driving this train.
Yes, she's the real deal. We were just lucky to be part of her story and part of her journey. We talk a lot about the early days and how much we've worked, but in reality, we just facilitate. We are the platform for her to go forward. She's the one that put all the work in. She's the one that did all the work. So we were lucky enough. I'm lucky enough to be part of that story.
Yeah. Well, let's expand on that a little bit more. You're the executive director or CEO of Access Youth, and which is an integral part of the urban squash narrative. But, talk a little bit about your origin story of what inspired you to start Access Youth and where it was and where it is today. I know we're going to spend some time talking about where the future is, which is beyond exciting,
Sure.
But let's just catch the listeners up to where you are today.
Sure. So I was squash coach in college. I was coaching in Boston, and then I was coaching in a game, and then this character with non-matching socks called Greg Zaff leans in one day and says with that big voice, "Renato, you are the wrong job." And I'm like, who is this guy? Who is this mythical guy? And then he gave me his card. It says, "Come see me next week in my office here at Squash Busters." And I got really puzzled by it. So I went to visit him, and then he told me for about an hour meeting and how hard it is to work with urban squash, and how hard it is to fundraise, and how difficult it is to get the kids to play quality squash. But in the end of the day, it will change their lives and your life. And Connor, I'll tell you, I mutated my DNA. That was the key factor in my life, because I came back home and I told my wife, I said, "Kim, I think I found what I want to do." I was coaching at Harvard, and I thought I was doing great. So I had a great success, a great future ahead of me, but that wasn't it.
All right, but so you're talking with Greg Zaff, who is essentially the godfather of urban squash and the CEO of Squash Busters. But then how'd you go from Boston to the West Coast?
Yeah, so after the chat with Greg, there was no job offer, but luckily a board was formed here in San Diego, and they were looking for an ED. There was an ad on the Squash magazine, and they were looking for someone to be the first employee. I put my hand up, I flew in, I interviewed, and they liked me. So I ended up taking the job and moving back to the West Coast. My wife's from Orange County, so I was now finally in a place that I thought I could raise a family and be here for long term. And that was it. That's 13 years ago.
It's funny you mentioned that Squash magazine. That's how I got one of my jobs too. When I started working at US Squash, I was in Chicago at the time, and I saw a job listing in Squash magazine. So who knew? A lot of great things can happen just by reading it.
Absolutely.
So, walk me through where 13 years ago you get there, and where are you the first employee essentially?
Yes. So when I got here, San Diego, as you can imagine, is not a big hub of squash at all. I have this kind of bad joke that squash in San Diego is beach volleyball in Alaska. This is not a place that squash should by Normally, it's not a place that we have a lot of history, but there is a squash club here. There's some players. There's some great people here playing squash. And I took the job. And then first day, it's funny. I walk into the squash club where the founder, Greg Sherman, was on his desk, and I say, "Greg, Renato here, reporting for my first day of work." He gives me a bank card with there was some funds raised already, and says, "Thanks, mate. Good luck." And I say, "Yeah, but I'm a squash coach. I don't really know what I'm gonna do." Like, and he says, "Yeah, that's exactly what we hire you for. Go figure it out." So it was actually great because we had no kids, we had no program, we had curriculum, we had nothing. So I went to IKEA, I bought a desk, I put a desk together, and I put it behind a rack of clothes at the squash club, and I stay until the rest of the day until 5 p.m. thinking, what am I gonna do? I was in a great place of work, and now I changed to this gamble. What am I gonna do? So I called Greg Zaff, and I said, Greg, you gave me the inspiration, now help me. So I flew back the next day to Boston, and I spent some days with him learning on the early stages of Squash Busters and what should we do. So he's still my Yoda. He's still my guy. He still helps me, and I think we're doing okay now. We've done some good work on this past 13 years.
Well, that definitely resonates with me. I had a similar experience when I was in Chicago and trying to get Metro Squash off the ground. I literally went to Barnes and Nobles. I bought 5 books on how to start a nonprofit for dummies, just to get a sense of the organizational structure. But like you identified, there's a huge curriculum and squash aspect to it that you also need to solve for. So, and we had some of the same challenges out in Chicago where, if you can rewind the clock to 2003, people didn't think that a program like that could be started in Chicago. And now because of people like yourself who've really just broken down those barriers and proven that, yes, it can be successful. And the good news is, for those people who are starting urban squash chapters today, the umbrella organization of SCA, Squash Education Alliance, makes me the journey that you and I faced less of a hurdle.
For sure.
And that's a huge credit to what it is. And I think let's spend a little bit of time, because I know there's such a powerful network there these days that, though they're independent programs, there is much more of this cohesion. And so give some perspective on what you think the SCA is doing today that is helping you, and where would you potentially like to see it going in the future?
Yeah, so SCA is a huge asset for all of us around the country and the world. 20 programs in the US and 5 international. So SCA is a huge asset of knowledge and expertise and actually assistance to get this ball rolling. They have a great professionals, Tim on the helm and doing great work as the ED of SCA. But Becky and Sonia, these are professionals, and Maggie, they are actually fantastic in what they do. So it is much easier now than kind of figure it out as we were trying back 15 plus years ago for you guys and 13 for us. I think the SCA is just going to grow more and more. I do feel that, we talk a lot, all the squash programs and SCA, we talk about how can we shape this to be the best resource for everyone. It's hard, Connor, because there are the big programs on big cities like New York, Philly, Chicago, and Boston. Those are the marquee programs. And then there are the mid-sized programs, and then a bunch of little ones. And it's so different from one to another. So how can someone look at Squash Busters in 3 locations, their own facilities, and say, I'm going to start this in a little town of X? It's hard. It's just too far apart. So that's a struggle SCA and the network is figuring it out, and how to kind of support all of them, not equally, but on a meaningful way. We don't have the answer yet. We're trying to figure this out. But I think it's going the right direction. We just had the Jubilee, 25 years of urban squash, and SCA raised over, I think, $3 million, I believe. So that's a great boost for them to continue to help. So I'm really happy, and I'm looking forward for the next decade or so. I think we can do a lot of things together.
If you had to be, and before I ask this question, because I was at the Jubilee with you, and what a just spectacular moment to celebrate, the 25th anniversary. And it was, as far as I know, the largest squash event in history
Mm-hmm.
of or dinner. And think of all the people from around the globe that were brought together,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just very inspiring. So if you had to, because I know that you think big, if you had to like forecast or envision where could squash be in 10 or 15 years, where would you aspirationally like it to be?
Such a good question. So I think, of course, the number is gonna continue to grow fast, but I maybe I'm getting on a kind of hot water here, but I would like to see quality of our kids around the world to play better squash. That would be something that we haven't. We have some pockets of excellence with players like Jesse Pacheco and Chris
Mm-hmm.
Fernandez and Reyna Pacheco. Those are amazing players, and we have more in the network in the past 25 years, but that's not enough. We can do better.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the JCTs today, the top 32 players in each division, there's not one urban squash player, and that's a problem. So although I would like to see the network to grow, not only in the U.S., in markets in the U.S., like San Diego used to be, a very small one, to other countries in the world, but I also would like to see the quality of squash being played in urban squash programs to be much higher. I see the kids from Colombia, Squash Urbano Colombia, from Esteban. These are amazing players. I see a starting program from Carlos doing El Salvador. These kids are real players, and we are having
Yeah.
a hard time to do the same thing in the U.S. So I would love to see, and we are talking about it. We're hiring some great coaches. Street Squash hired Simba to do some great work in Harlem, and I know there's a lot of good movement happening. But that'll be a dream. Because the reality is this: we have a lot of amazing athletes in our hands. Why can we translate that to success in the junior scene? And to be honest, beyond that, more great college players, more professional squash players. That's what we're trying to do in San Diego. We are going to now, we'll talk more in the future a little bit about what we're doing for the next 10 years of access, but we want to have a higher caliber of players, and that's something that I'm going to go back to coaching more, Connor, because it's where I love to do.
I was about to ask about that. Yeah, so I want, because that was obviously one of your core passions
Yeah,
is the coaching aspect,
yeah.
right? And I think the role of a coach. I was watching one of your episodes on squash skills, which definitely resonated with me. It's like the role of a coach, I think, in any sport is actually much more than just transfer of knowledge of a
Mm-hmm.
specific skill, right?
Yeah,
Like it's almost, in order to have the best athlete development, it's a holistic approach, and I
absolutely.
think that's something that you have been practicing for a long time. So I'd love. It's hard to distill or boil down like your core philosophies. I'm sure in like a timely manner, because it's the repetitiveness. It's embedding it over time.
Yeah.
But like, what do you try and emphasize most with your players? And you could use Reyna, because I know. I mean, you're talking about developing an elite player, and you sort of you got that right off the bat. I mean, Reyna broke all the barriers and ascended to the top of the junior rankings, collegiate rankings, and joined the tour.
Mm-hmm. So let me tell you a few things about this because this is something I'm very passionate about. The number one is information nowadays is public. I feel that if you want to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to play a straight drive, oh my goodness, you can do that from the moon because it's public. You can go to Squash Skills. You can really learn how to play squash online. That's not a problem. So what makes a player develop faster and better? And that's the role of a coach, as well as a few other things. But the coach has to play a big role in it, but not the actual technique only, but the other aspects
Mm-hmm.
of it, which is the most important thing, the more which I spoke at Squash Skills, but I speak about this often. It's all about connection, Connor. All about connection. You're gonna meet the player where they are, and then you got to take them step by step on their journey. And when I coached Reyna, I did not know what she wanted to become, and then it becomes a 50-50 relationship. Meaning, if
Mm-hmm.
she wants to play hard, she's actually driving me to coach her hard, and then I'm coaching her to play hard, and then the cycle starts. So sometimes I see parents or players or kids saying, "Hey, I hired this great coach, therefore I'm going to be great." Actually, it doesn't work that way because the player is 50% of the whole, maybe 51% to be honest, because they drive the entire thing, not the coach. The coach is going to react to what the kid gives them. So and then the relationship starts. I got a text from a great, now he's I think 24, 25 years old. He played for Williams College. He's a kid from San Diego, and he watched the uh, um, Little America show, and he texted me. That was like 3 days ago. He said, Renato, I just watched the show and I loved it. I just want to let you know that those lessons that you mentioned to Reyna on that episode, I have them in my heart too. And I was so happy because it wasn't the squash
Yeah.
playing, it was the lessons off the court. And that's the privilege that coaches have with the kids. And I think we just got to explore them much more. And we have great people in squash, great coaches. And sometimes we just get a little too narrow sighted on coaching them the boasts or the lobs. Give them real lessons, inspire them. And by the way, I'm much more inspired by coaching these kids now than I was prior to that. So it's a two-way road, and I think we should explore them much better. That's how I think we develop human beings that happen to play squash.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. And I came to squash relatively late to a lot of other players or good players. Like I didn't touch a racket till I was 16. And my entree into the sport was actually teen squash. I went to boarding school. And so it was like a very different perspective of like, I wanted to get better so I could do better for the team. And I think that was a contributing factor towards why I still love the sport so much today. And I give that in contrast to, I think you're talking about the player needs to drive the process to a certain respect. And, one of the downsides I see of the junior squash community today is when it's parent driven or coach driven and the player is not totally involved. They'll participate. They may even perform excellently. However, that then stops when the outside influence stops. So you get the college and college being the end game versus for me, this is part of my life and it's what's driven how I've gotten so much from the sport that any way I can give back in any way, shape, or form, I try and do.
Yeah, if squash is played with the right intention, and don't get me wrong, it has a lot of it comes to college squash because the nature of what it is. But if you play, or if you're taught around the game as a game is part of your life, because it keeps your body and your mind sane, and eventually it will continue. If it's only an end game to go to college, as we know that happens with most of the kids, they stop playing and they play for a little bit and they stop. And squash is our vehicle to teach kids how to be better human beings. And nowadays, especially nowadays, we need a lot of that opportunity to teach them to do the right thing. And we should continue to think about that as a vehicle, not only a means to get to college, which, by the way, it should be both, but the real one should be a vehicle to teach them life lessons.
Well, let's drill down into that. So for you and when you're coaching your students at Access Youth, like what are some of the core things that you're trying to reinforce every day?
So it starts with this one. So this is one of the Renato's bad sayings again. Small things.
Oh yeah, I want more of these. Yeah.
Small things every day for a long period of time. So we want to create change in ourselves, in our potential future. We gotta be consistent in what we do. So here's a funny story for you. When I started Access, I was 26, 27 years old. And so I looked young, and I'm going to these people's homes, the kids we are about to recruit. And I'm saying, hey, my name's Renato. I'm from Brazil. And I'm doing this program for 12 years. And I'm going to stay with your kid from 7th grade, 2 years post-college. I'm going to help them to go to college. And it's free for you for 12 years. And these families are going, oh my God, this guy is on drugs. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And my answer to that, and I was really young, so no one really trusted me. So I said, Mom, Dad, for the kids, time will tell. We're going to be here 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and on. So, and that's what I tell the kids: be consistent, have great plan for your routines, for your work at school, at home, for your squash, and then live by it. Be good at it. And that's the premise of everything, which includes when we go to a squash practice and I say, guys, we have 7 minutes to get changed and be on court ready to go. I mean 7 minutes. Otherwise, we're wasting time on chatter at the locker room. And people get good at this. And then what happens is a snowball that goes the good way because you start to kind of be efficient and be driven and have purpose in everything that you do. And that's why when the Reyna was in our team, she was one out of, I don't know, 9 girls that were fantastic. We won the under-19 division when we were 14 because everyone felt that momentum moving forward. So it's a kind of like as excellence thing. Let's really try to be the best we can be at all times. And if people buy into this, then the peer pressure is positive, and the coaches are just kind of elevating everyone together. And that's the vibe that I would like to continue to do at Access.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, it's shaping that culture for success. And so I want to hear some other Renato sayings, and I think, give us the ones that you enjoy, and then also which ones get the most amount of eye rolls. Let's hear the spectrum.
Oh my goodness! So I've given you the beach volleyball and the squash, the small things every day. It's funny because I'm gonna keep thinking about this, but I have one student. Her name is Hannah Boucha. Hannah was the same 1 year after Reyna, and she ended up playing at Dartmouth, and now she is working at Stanford doing some great stuff. And every time I came with my stuff, with my things, she said, here comes Renato's joke. And become the Renato's joke was every time Renato said something was not funny or not good. But it's just like a dad figure. You make fun of dad, making the dad jokes.
Yeah.
And the little things like I don't drink alcohol. I think most of our kids that they don't drink much alcohol or any because wasn't part of the upbringing. That's the role of the coach, the role model that I think we should continue to try to do the best we can. As I remember, Connor, more of my nuggets, I'll keep giving it to you.
I also want to shift into, just to give more context and background for people, is clearly you're so instrumental at developing that culture from a coaching perspective, but then there's also, that's what happens on the day-to-day basis of ultimately shaping the kids' lives. But then there's a business aspect to this, right? And it's the talk about your journey there of forming the organization and both if you can share some of the struggles, but also some of the successes.
Yeah, I can surely more struggles than successes. So a non-profit is a regular business like everyone else. The only difference is that when we make profits, we just don't take dividends. We don't pay ourselves more. It stays on the non-profit. But to be successful, I think you have to run it the most efficient way possible. And the other thing is there's a board above you. So they dictate to the direction of how we want to do business. And I'm really fortunate, Connor, that I have a fantastic board chair. Blair Sadler is a squash player for life, went to Amherst, was on the board of US Squash, and has been my board chair for most of my time at Access, and he is my partner in crime, and he's my everything. So I'm very lucky to have a leader with me that's also a visionary, dreams big, works very hard. So the struggles I feel that is always around fundraising and scaling, because what comes first, a good program or money? You can not have a program without money. So is that kind of like conundrum that we live on? We do not have the privilege of making money on squash where I live easier. It takes a lot of time to raise. Reason why, Connor, we are the first urban squash program that removed the name squash in our title. We are called Access Youth Academy, and we used to be called Surf City Squash, so which was an odd name just to start with, but we changed and we removed squash because we believe squash to where we live is not the main focus. And it's funny enough, the year we did that, we raised the most money, and it's been really good thus far. So that's one thing. Lack of courts. There's so many variables on running a nonprofit, and I'm not even talking about the struggles of the kids. I'm talking about the business side. There's building a staff, and there's really a lot of points and topics that can be a great success but also can be a big struggle.
What's your average operating budget per year?
Yeah, currently we are about $700,000. First year was 118, so now on year 13 it's 700,000.
Wow. And what was the starting point of the number of kids you had in the program back then, and in contrast to now?
The first cohort was 2 classes of 9 kids, so we had 18 kids on the first year, and now we have 120.
Wow. Well, this is a good transition to there's some exciting news I know we want to share about going on there, but quickly, because I know I had the pleasure of being at US Squash when Blair was there too,
Yep.
and one of the books that he encouraged us all to read and we use as sort of a backbone was the Jim Collins Good to Great,
Yes.
specifically for the nonprofit sector. Yep. And it's still to this day the book I gift the most. Yeah. Anyone I hear, and actually mostly to anyone I hear joining the board of directors, to really, because if people can have a diverse skill set, like whether it's in business or medicine or whatever, but if joining a board to me is a serious commitment, and I think that book helps give context but also shared language. And so I just wanted
it's a great book.
I'm sure Blair took you through it step by step.
Of course.
But going into, I'd love to share, there's a bright future ahead for Access Youth, and why don't you share the highlights, but then we'll go into the struggle.
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, I proposed on a board meeting that we scaled our program and trying to find a permanent home. So we've had the journey is basically a combination of struggles. We had Access was on the ballot proposition for a partnership between public and private funds 5 years ago. We were about to get $2.5 million of funding, and exactly 32 days prior to receiving the money, the principal of a partner school where the school is going to be placed, our building is going to be placed, left, and our project was dead. So this was after drawings were made and we spent some real money. So that was the first kind of like we left on the altar big time. That was hurtful. That to pick ourselves up after that was hard, and we did. And then we had a philanthropist that kind of pledged to give us a piece of land, and he kind of did not make his mind for a couple of years and ended up not giving us the land nor the money. And that was the second time we went down the road with no success. And we believed that was the right path to go, so we stayed on it. And now we just crossed the finish line by close our financing. That was about 22 days ago. We closed our financing and we raised some real money. So now we are building a 8-court facility, 4 classrooms, 7 single courts and 1 doubles. In the great location. We bought the land already. So we break ground on first week of April now of 2020. And this facility will be an absolutely beacon of hope in the southeast of San Diego, an area that is very similar to a Bronx or area that is in need in town. People think of San Diego of a great city, beautiful, that always sunny and there's no poverty. Not at all. Tijuana is right here in the border, and there's a lot of problems in our city as well that we're here to help make it better. So we're really excited to open this new facility. We have a different approach, Connor, on how to run the business from now on. Once we open, we scale our numbers up on the program, but we also run this facility as a club. So if anyone wants to come play, are in town and become a member of the Access facility, they can do that, and all the proceeds turn back to the low-income students. So it's we have a big earned revenue plan for the new facility, which is very exciting.
Wow. And I mean, that is, I think that's a huge milestone for any program to achieve. And, those twists and turns that you experience, I think are really, they're the norm. It's not talked about as much. Like we only hear about when the money finally gets raised and all that stuff. But I mean, that's a 5-year journey for you of not knowing where it would end up. So, I think that's a testament to the drive of not just yourself, but the rest of the board and the community supporting you. And it's really a network to get across the finish line.
I tell you that the board, I stand right beside the board on this. The board has been fantastic. Supported the dream the entire way. When we were not having success, instead of saying, hey, let's stop doing this and go back to our regular work, they said, stay on it. We will make it happen. Really inspiring.
What if, now looking back, was there any sort of, not secret ingredient, but a strategy or something that sort of you guys kept coming back to know what the right path was? Or how did you guys approach that?
Good question. I think resiliency is one of the things. And if you really believe you want to do this, everyone at some point felt, I'm done. I'm not going to pursue this anymore. And some said, I'm not stopping. We were the ones that were saying we're not stopping. So when is your quit date? We did not see our quit date coming ever. We believed on this deeply. So that's one thing. If people should think about opening a nonprofit or building a building or whatever it is, if you really believe it, just stay with it. And Greg Zaff called, of course, the Yoda of squash always knows it. He said to me, Renato, this deal is going to die 7 times before you make it. And I think I'm hopeful that my number 7 reached already. So now I'm going to make this thing work. But that's the reality. And those words stayed with me. When we got left in the altar first time, I said, okay, that's death 1. Let's keep going. Yeah. So that's one of them. The second one is bring the right people to your party, meaning get the board to really believe in what you do and make them as excited as you are. That's important because they have a very active say. Not only that, but the people that you bring in on the project or on your staff. Don't settle for B's. Go for A's. Dream big. Our world it's so much no's, Connor. We get no for donations. We ask for help and often we get a no. I get a lot of no's, but we happen to appreciate them after a while because, if you really believe on something, you got to just stay with it. And that's it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. This world of helping students in a non-profit world. But I do believe that makes everyone stronger and better. And also a lot of support on the other side, which is one of the reasons we can talk a little bit now as well, what I'm doing next, starting tomorrow. But keeping yourself healthy, mentally sane and happy is key. Otherwise, I don't think I'll last 13 years in this job.
Quickly, because before we move on to the next topic, which is fascinating, I can't wait to learn more. I just want to pause and make sure we acknowledge some of the significant partners that helped you get to the finish line, because I know the city of San Diego is involved in this project. Isn't that right? Is that what I read?
Yeah. So we got some major gifts. I don't think nothing really compares to the big East Coast gifts, but the California Endowment gave us $1 million. The Alliance Healthcare Foundation was a healthcare foundation that thinks we are preventive to healthcare. So here's another angle that's outside squash.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
They gave us a $1 million grant, which we were the innovators of the year. So we got this big grant. But the biggest one is the city of San Diego just gave us $5.5 million. And it's kind of like weird for me to keep saying those big numbers and thinking, oh, Access is doing great. No, these are money that went for the facility to design and build in this facility. We are a small to medium nonprofit trying to just raise funds to pay bills on a daily basis. The hustle is real. So, but now also, once again, here comes Greg Zaff. He says, once you get bigger, it gets easier because people will follow success. You can see a Metro Squash. Metro Squash was I think I've been going to Chicago to see you guys' work and David Kay, which is an absolute genius. When you guys were still in the kind of the back of a church and renting space, and I've been to your new facility many times, and I think it's easier now because you created like this momentum. We're trying to get there.
Yeah, I experienced that time and time again, and it's the irony of when you need the most help is when the least amount of people are willing to support it. And it's not giving up. And those twists and turns that we faced are very, I've experienced many, many times over. So what I think from a global perspective at all these programs, and you mentioned David Kay, who's been at Metro Squash 15 years, Greg Zaff, truly from the beginning, 25 years, is there are so many core leaders who have been at their program, shepherding it from success to success, never giving up. And those are long, I think I'm sure you would agree, they're extremely rewarding and fulfilling, but also taxing. And so talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you're going on a sabbatical and how that concept came about, and then also what you're going to do.
Yeah, so I'll happy to share that, but let me take one instance back in my early days of Access. So here I am, married with, I think I had one daughter. I have 3 daughters now, but I think only Marina was born at that time. And I'm giving all my time. I'm coaching, I'm driving the van, I'm fundraising, I'm doing the academics and the squash, the whole spiel. And one day I get home tired and drained, and my wife pulls me aside and says, Renato, I need to talk to you. And when the wife says I need to talk to you, you know this is something usually not that good. And she said,
what year is this again?
Oh, that was on the early years. So this was on the first maybe 5 years. For sure, no initial. Yeah, and she says, I would like, she said 30%. Please leave 30% for me and your family.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Wow. It shook me. It made me realize that I'm giving everything to Access, and it's draining. So the whole point about this is that this job is draining. Not only it's hard to raise money and run a business like that, but then comes you dealing with people's lives that you love those kids and love those parents of these kids, and you want to help them, and it's not easy. So I do think those leaders, not only the leaders of the programs, but everyone involved, they're amazing, and they're really amazing. So kudos to Greg and George and Tim and Steve and everyone that's running a program deserves a lot of credit. And I'm just really fortunate to be doing this work here. So that brings me to your next question is, what am I doing? In San Diego, there's a foundation, which I'm going to give them a shout out. It's called the Fieldstone Network. Fieldstone build homes. And then years ago, instead of giving checks to nonprofits, they said, let's do this in a more meaningful way. And they changed the way, instead of giving money to nonprofits, they were investing on nonprofit leaders. So most of the nonprofit leaders in San Diego, in Orange County.
Very interesting.
Oh, brilliant.
Wow.
Brilliant. So I started going to them, I think on my 6th or 7th year of Access, which is the 7-year itch, where people start leaving their jobs because it's too hard. And they really pick me up. They kind of help. It's very confidential. It's a peer-to-peer work. It's just mind-blowing how amazing they run their work, and really helpful for us. They are on the grind every day. And they do a lot of great programs. And one program they do is in partnership with the Claire Rose Foundation. And they do the sabbatical, which is they get a couple of EDs or CEOs of nonprofits in the area, and they offer them a 90-day sabbatical where they're not asking to do any type of work. It's actually lack of work. Not allowed to answer emails, not allowed to answer phone calls, 0. 90 days cold. That way you can really rejuvenate and re-energize and go back to your mission, to your purpose. And so I applied for this program, and I was lucky enough to get it. Just one more thing before telling you what I'm going to do. The bench, the other folks on the nonprofit, then they had to step up to kind of learn to run the organization for the next 90 days. So my second in command is going to be now doing the ED for 3 months, and the board steps up. There's money to support and coaching support. So basically, this model that the Claire Rose and Fieldstone are doing, it's something that I would love to share with SCA, because I think folks should definitely think about the well-being of their leaders. Every time I see Greg Zaff, the first thing he says is, how are you doing, man? Are you still doing okay? Because it's the first thing is kind of comforting each other. And it shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't be That we are you still kicking, or are you ready to quit? It shouldn't be that way. So I think this is something that if anyone's...
And is that based in San Diego only, or are they national as well?
Well, I think this time we got lucky. I think it's a San Diego and Orange County, but the leaders of the Claros and the Fieldstone are amazing women that can... I think they'll be happy to explore other areas and regions. I think a partnership with SCA would be a great thing that we can propose to them. Imagine if you get one SCA leader to take off every year and do this. That'd be fantastic, you know?
One thing, I completely hear you, and I think those things aren't insignificant. And other institutions, like academic institutions, that's already kind of a given that they do that. And I think integrating those ingredients of success into our organizations makes total sense. U.S. Squash, when I was there, I had left just before my 10-year mark. But had I stayed there, I would have had a chance to take 3 months off and do a sabbatical. Those are small things, and really it just gives every employee sort of something to look forward to.
I agree.
So talk through, how did you map out what you were going to go do over your 90 days? Was it immediate? Was there something you had always wanted to do that you're going to go scratch that itch, or did you research stuff? Like, how did you come up with what your plan is?
Both. So I love to travel, and I've always been thinking where places I want to do. Some places is basically vacation. I didn't want this to be a vacation because it's not. It's a sabbatical, which you should connect with yourself. So the place that I chose to do my first 5 weeks of the 3 months, I'm going to walk the Camino de Santiago, which is a historical walk from the south of France all the way to Santiago de Compostela, which is on the northwest side of Spain. It's about 830 miles, 830 kilometers. And I'm going to France tomorrow. So I'm starting my walk this Sunday. On March 1st is when I start.
Wow. Are you in shape to go walk all that?
I want to say that I am, but then I see some vlogs on YouTube and I see that's not an easy thing. But I am, it's not, to be honest with you, Connor, it's not like, do I want to get to Santiago de Compostela and finish this hike? Of course I do, but it's really a time to kind of connect and think about it. So if I fall in love with a little town somewhere, I want to stay longer. I'm just there to be and to be awake and to listen. So I'm not worried about, but I think I am going to make it. Time will tell. Let's see.
And so I'm sure you've given this a lot of thought. What are you bringing as tools, or whether it's drawing or photography or books that you want to read? What's sort of your game plan going into it?
Yeah. So the number one thing is no social media. Lack of cell phone. This is the number one thing. I plan to record one message to my family a day and then not touch the phone for anything else but video and photo. Journaling, I'm gonna write. I bought a journal. Just want to write as much as I can. A lot of listening, a lot of yoga if I can, to be quiet and to listen. So it's basically, and it's funny, on the preparation to this, Connor, I'm already slowing down. I can see myself the past 2 days really getting into a mindset of slowing down and talking to people. I think nowadays we connect less and less the way that we used to connect, which is talking to people, listening to people. In this walk, there are a lot of characters, and I would like to connect with them. So that's what I'm doing. It's nothing special. It's actually going simple instead of going fancy. Other way around.
Do you know anyone else going on the trip, or is this going to be?
No, I don't know anyone. No.
Well, you mentioned, I love all those things, and one thing I've been practicing or trying for a long time was meditation, and especially during sports performance, I saw the purpose of it, and it really resonated. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I was trying to get back into meditation and struggling. I think it was my competitive aspect of feeling like I was failing, or not able to measure how I was going. So I say that because I think there's a ton of great apps out there that people can follow. But one thing that did work for me was breathing techniques. that got me into a meditative state. So Wim Hof is one that I've learned about, and I don't quite do what he does all the time, but anyway, food for thought.
Yeah, so that's something that I am starting to practice more as well. And the other thing that I think it goes hand in glove with that, and is getting closer to your beliefs in terms of religion. I was raised Catholic. Back in Brazil, everyone's Catholic, but that has taken a kind of a back seat in my life, and I wanted to open that door again, and I think so. That's something that I think that's important for any human to kind of be in touch with their beliefs, and it can change. It can be different. It can be, and currently I want to up that volume a little bit more. I think it would be very beneficial for me and my family.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, spirituality, and I was raised Catholic myself and made some choices to sort of more depart from that, but it's also what it's, and more recently in the past, I think kind of 5 years it's still confronting that spirituality and connection to the universe. And it's been interesting, and I think it's kind of, it's acknowledging what is going on today, what's happening, but also connecting towards more of yourself.
Yeah.
And
if you are walking for, if you're walking for 8 hours a day, often alone, seeing about, you just start thinking a lot of those things. And that was the whole purpose of the Camino, is to really take some time to think about and see what happens, and allow things to happen to you in quiet, and be awake for those things. That's what I know is a little bit different than what we're talking about coaching and all this, but I'm looking for this reconnection in order to give and be the best coach I can be, a leader I can be. I like to be very in touch with myself, and that's the intention of this journey.
Yeah. So while you're walking, are you going to be listening to podcasts or books, or what are you?
Yeah.
Or just absorbing?
I downloaded a couple of books, not a couple, I'd say 28, just in case I'm stuck. And some are just very, very easy. Like Paulo Coelho. He's a Brazilian author that wrote The Alchemist. They wrote some kind of a easy reading books, and some of his writings about the Camino, which I'm going to do. So I got some of his books, but basically some things I always wanted to listen/read. But I'm now that I'm leaving tomorrow, I'm thinking I'm probably not going to be listening too much. I'll be listening to birds. I'll be listening to nature. Yeah. So we don't know. If I need some help, I'll put some earbuds on and listen to something.
Great. Well, I'm mindful of your time, but before we wrap up, there are some questions, like quick fire questions, and they don't have to be quick answers for you, but try and extract more of Renato, the person. So I'm going to ask you a few questions.
Yes,
and
let's do it.
So imagine you had to give a TED Talk, like the great things on YouTube that you see. It couldn't be something that you're known for. So squash is obviously out of the question.
Yeah.
What would be something that you would have to go explore and then share? So kind of like something maybe you've been thinking about doing or have been doing but haven't shared publicly. So what, if you had to give a TED Talk about, would it be?
Wow, that's a good question. So how about this? And take it if it's a good or bad answer. But one of my hobbies, I do the flying trapeze. Like you've seen the circus. And I think that is a great, first of all, great exercise, but it's a great mental challenge and a daily mental challenge. Every time you go up the platform and you hold that bar and you're ready to jump out of it, your demons will come out. There's no way around it. You are going to get a little scared. And so it's a great way to challenge yourself on a daily basis. I've been flying the trapeze for years and years, and I'm 40 years old and I still work on it. So I'll probably talk about facing your fears on strange ways, like the flying trapeze.
That's awesome. And when did you pick that up?
So in my previous life, Connor, I used to work in a resort called Club Med, and I was the tennis pro on different resorts around the world. And then I transitioned to become the flying trapeze guy. So I picked up a flying trapeze. I know it sounds so surreal, but that's the truth. So what am I going to say?
So was this in your 20s or 30s or
early 20s? Early 20s.
Early 20s.
Yes.
That's
awesome. That's where I met my wife. I was a tennis pro in the Bahamas, and Kim was the windsurf instructor. So the tennis pro went to the beach and looked at this beautiful American girl and said, "Oh, there we go. That's history."
Wow, love it. So shifting gears into sort of inspiration, and what I would like you, if you can share, and it doesn't have to be one, it could be one or two, but if there's any piece of content that is like on the web, whether it's a blog post or a YouTube video or anything that's easily shareable that has really impacted you and your life and what you think, what would you share?
Oh, another good question. So I like to say two quick things and just come to mind. First of all,
Sure.
is Teddy Roosevelt's quote about being in the arena. If you're not familiar with it, he talks about if you want to, be in the arena, don't be a bystander. If you believe in something, go there and be part of it. It's a beautiful quote that I have it on my office. I had it in my house, and I read it often. That's one. And the second one is Reyna has a beautiful speech on the 20th anniversary of SCA, and it's on YouTube. And I think it represents a lot of urban squash does to the students. And I think those two pieces, more on the squash side with the Reyna Pacheco at the SCA 20th, and then Roosevelt's quote, I think, is brilliant.
Love it. Well, I'll try and track those down, and we can share as well.
Mm-hmm.
The two last questions. So, what gets you fired up? And this could be either like positive or just like frustrated, but frustration turns into action. And it can be in squash world or outside of squash world, whichever you want. But what really, like, I know you're Brazilian too, so we got a lot of fire going on. But like, what fires you up?
Okay, what gets me excited about on the positive side is the possibilities. If you think about how we can lift each other up, really fires me up. I was born, Connor, on a middle upper class in Brazil. My dad was VP of IBM. I was really lucky, and I realized this big time that I played squash because I came from a rich family that could afford squash. I speak English because I was lucky enough that my dad could afford taking me to schools and places. So I know that. It wasn't me. It was the family I was born. And so what gets me fired up is I would love to give the same equal chance to everyone. That's the reason why I'm in urban squash. Not because I want to make kids play great squash, but I think it's unfair where kids were born. So that gets me really, really fired up. But I want to give you a something on the squash court, because in the day, the squash talk here. What gets me fired up in squash is when someone tries to kind of trash talk you or kind of or provoke you on a game. I am Brazilian, so when you poke a Brazilian, you're gonna find something. So when I remember so many matches where someone says that was a double pickup, no, that I thought that was good, and it goes, and there's this little thing about like you were cheating or oh man, that gets me going because I really
it hits your integrity, right?
Then I remember one match. I will not name the person, but I was in the fifth game on an exhibition for charity. It wasn't a real big tournament, and I was cooked. I was down the fifth. I was not going to be able to come back, and I volleyed, and the ball was great, but it wasn't down. It did not hit the tin. And he said, "Hey, you a cheat. You're a cheat." And I said, "There's no way in this universe I'm going to leave this court losing this game to this guy now."
Oh wow!
So it's just things like this gets me going, and I don't get angry. It just gets me like ready to
get you fired up
to fight. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would share that. Like anything that sort of encroaches on my integrity or principles, it's like 0 to 100, right?
Yes.
That definitely. Yeah. I hear you. Well, and the last thing I have, and this might, you may already have the answer with your sabbatical, but, is there anything, so maybe forecast this way into the future, like 5 or 10 years, but is there anything new that you're thinking of trying and why?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. I am, so if you stay with the work topic here, once we open this new facility in 2021, we have plans to bring Access Youth Academy to other locations around us, one being Tijuana, Mexico. That gets me, it will be the first program that I think we have two countries cross-border. And that really is something that I think we can do on a kind of a quick timeline, and also expand our program to LA. We're already moving and finding some good partners there. There's some good chats going on. So having a few programs in LA, in San Diego, in Tijuana is something that I think is my long-term goal here at Access, and the board's on board. And I think this is something that I can see myself doing for the next 5-10 years.
Wow. Well, I feel like that's going to be a tough note to top, so we're going to close it out there. And just want to thank you for your time and all the hard work. It's hard to really encapsulate fully the impact that people like you have had on the fabric of the squash community. And I know how meaningful you've impacted other people's lives. And so thank you for your hard work. And I'm glad you're taking care of yourself to continue taking care of others.
For sure. I want to thank you for inviting me. There's a lot of great people to talk, and just to be asked to share a little bit means a lot to me. Also want to say that these podcasts, is funny how the reach of these podcasts, that someone started podcasting squash back home, and their first episode happened this past week, and I heard it and I'm very inspired by it. And I know your podcast is much more followed by his, and I know that hopefully people can listen to it, and if they take something out of this chat, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, good luck on your journey, and we'll be sure to stay in touch. And thank you again for your time.
You got it, Connor. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and for joining us on Squash Radio. We hope you enjoyed this latest episode. But before you leave, we just have one quick last message. As you know, Squash Radio wants to help tell some of the best stories from Squash World. But in order to do that, we want and welcome your help. Do you know a person or a story that involves squash that is interesting, funny, moved you care about, reflects your passion for the sport? Well, share it with us, and let's try and get it out there on the air. You can email me at squashradio@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media. Again, thanks for your time, and, well, until next time, be well and have fun.